Welcome to our deep dive into the world of SYNGAP1, or SYNGAP1 related disorder. We'll be focusing on a research paper about it, um, unpacking the advancements in understanding and potentially treating this rare genetic condition. So we'll break down what SYNGAP1 is and why this disorder is attracting so much attention from researchers. We'll explore the challenges for patients and families and dive into the promising research.
Yeah, it's a fascinating field that's really evolving quickly, and we'll try to, break it down for you.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is SYNGAP1 and what happens when this gene goes wrong?
SYNGAP1, or SYNGAP1 as it's pronounced, is a gene that provides instructions for building a protein, a very important protein for brain function. You can think of this protein as a key player in the communication network of our brain cells, helping them to send and receive signals effectively. And so in SYNGAP1 related disorder, or SRD, there's a disruption in this gene leading to a shortage of the protein.
So it's like having a faulty communication system in the brain.
Exactly, and this faulty communication can have a wide range of impacts, leading to the various developmental and neurological challenges seen in SRD.
The paper mentions something called haploinsufficiency. Can you break that down for me? It sounds a bit intimidating.
Oh, it's actually a very simple concept. Haplo refers to half, and insufficiency means not enough. So in SRD, you essentially have only half the amount of this SYNGP1 protein that's needed for normal brain development. Imagine a car trying to run on only two cylinders. It's just not going to function optimally.
That makes sense. So half the protein leads to a whole bunch of problems. But why is SRD specifically considered such a promising target for therapeutic development?
That's a great question. There are a few key reasons. Firstly, the genetic cause of SRD is very clear. It's this disruption in the SYNGFP1 gene. This makes it a prime candidate for precision medicine, where treatments can be tailored to address the specific genetic root of the problem.
So it's like having a target painted on the gene, making it easier for researchers to hit it with treatments.
Exactly. Secondly, there's already a lot of scientific momentum building around SRD. We have a robust and rapidly expanding body of research, multiple labs and clinics dedicated to studying SYNGAP1, and a growing toolkit of resources, including patient-derived cell lines, animal models, and even brain organoids, which are basically mini brains grown in a dish.
Wow, mini brains. That sounds straight out of science fiction.
It does, doesn't it? But it's a real and powerful tool for studying how brain cells communicate and how SYNGP1 mutations disrupt those processes.
That's incredible. Okay, so we have a clear target and a lot of scientific firepower aimed at it. Is there anything else that makes SRG particularly attractive for therapeutic development?
Yes, and this is where it gets really interesting. Unlike some other rare diseases, SRD is likely significantly underdiagnosed.
Wait, really? Why is that?
Well, there are a few reasons. SRD is a relatively newly recognized condition, so it's not always on the radar of healthcare professionals. Plus, its symptoms can overlap with other conditions like autism spectrum disorder or intellectual disability leading to misdiagnosis. And access to genetic testing, which is needed for a definitive diagnosis, can be patchy depending on where you live and your healthcare coverage.
So there are potentially many people out there living with SRD without even knowing it.
That's the thought, and this underdiagnosis has significant implications for therapeutic development. As awareness grows and genetic testing becomes more widely available, more and more patients are likely to be identified, creating a larger potential market for treatments.
That makes sense. It's like a hidden population waiting to be discovered, and that discovery could fuel further investment in research and treatment.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that behind those numbers are real individuals and families facing significant challenges.
Right. We've talked about the science, but let's not forget the human side of this. What are the real-life impacts of SRD on patients and their families?
The core features of SRD are intellectual disability, epilepsy, and autism spectrum disorder. But it's much more than just a collection of symptoms. Individuals with SRD can face a wide range of challenges, from severe behavioral issues and sleep disturbances to difficulties with walking, eating, and even sensory processing.
Wow, that's a lot to cope with. It sounds incredibly difficult.
It is, and for many families, those challenges continue into adulthood, with a high dependence on caregivers for daily living, persistent seizures, and difficulties managing behavioral issues.
It really paints a picture of the urgency in finding effective treatments, not just for the patients themselves, but for their families as well.
Absolutely. And there's one other aspect that makes understanding the number of people affected by SRD so difficult. It's a spectrum disorder.
What does that mean in this context?
It means that the severity of symptoms can vary widely from person to person. Some individuals may have mild intellectual disability and only occasional seizures, while others may experience profound developmental delays and frequent intractable seizures.
So there's no one-size-fits-all description of SRD.
Exactly. Each individual's experience is unique, making it even more challenging to diagnose and treat.
It really highlights the complexity of this disorder and the need for personalized approaches to care and treatment.
You're absolutely right. And speaking of personalized approaches, let's delve into the promising research avenues that offer hope for the future of SRD treatment.
Okay, let's talk about hope. What are some of the therapeutic approaches that are being explored right now?
Well, the good news is that there's a diverse pipeline of potential therapies for SRD with multiple approaches moving forward in various stages of development.
Okay, that's encouraging. Can you paint a picture of what this pipeline looks like?
Certainly. One approach that holds a lot of promise is the use of small molecules. These are basically drugs that can be taken orally or through injection, and they're designed to either boost the production of the SYNGAP1 protein or to enhance the function of the existing protein. Think of it like giving your brain a little extra help to make up for the shortfall caused by the SYNGAP1 mutation.
So it's like giving those two car cylinders an extra boost of power.
Exactly. And there are already a couple of small molecules being tested in human trials. One of them is called 4-phenylbutyrate, which is already approved for use in other conditions. So researchers are hoping it might also benefit individuals with SRD.
I've heard of drug repurposing before. It seems like a faster route to potential treatments than starting from scratch, right?
It can be, yes. And the SYNGAP Research Fund, or SRF, which we discussed earlier, is actually actively investing in several drug repurposing initiatives. They're essentially screening libraries of existing drugs to see if any of them might have a positive impact on SRD.
That's a clever approach, like looking for a hidden gem among existing medications. What about gene therapy? I've heard a lot of buzz about that, and it sounds pretty futuristic.
Gene therapy is definitely a hot topic in SRD research, and it's a very exciting area. The basic idea is to deliver a functional copy of the SYNGAP1 gene directly into brain cells, effectively replacing the faulty gene with a healthy one.
So it's like giving those brain cells a software update.
That's a great way to think about it. And there are a few different ways researchers are trying to achieve this. One approach is to use a harmless virus, like an adeno-associated virus, or AAV, as a delivery vehicle. They basically engineered this virus to carry the healthy SYNGAP1 gene and then inject it into the brain where it infects neurons and delivers its precious cargo.
That's incredible. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it? But this is real science, and it's happening right now. There are several companies and research groups actively developing AAV-based gene therapies for SRD, each with its own unique approach.
So it's like a race to the finish line with different teams taking different routes. Are there any other promising avenues being explored?
Yes, there are. Researchers are also investigating the potential of stem cell therapy, particularly a type called hematopoietic stem cell therapy.
Stem cells, another one of those buzzwords I've heard but don't fully understand. Can you break it down for me?
Hematopoietic stem cells are found in bone marrow, and they're basically the building blocks for all our blood cells. What's interesting is that they can be modified to produce and secrete specific proteins like the SYNGAP1 protein that's lacking in SRD.
So it's like turning these stem cells into tiny factories that churn out the missing protein.
Exactly. And the idea is that once these modified stem cells are transplanted back into the patient, they'll circulate throughout the body and deliver the protein to the brain, potentially providing a continuous supply over a long period of time.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. It's incredible to think that something as seemingly simple as a blood cell could hold the key to treating a complex brain disorder.
It is. And there are even more early-stage investigations underway exploring novel RNA therapies using exosomes, which are tiny bubbles released by cells as delivery vehicles for treatment and even replacement gene therapy using different types of AAVs.
Okay, so there's a lot of activity and a lot of different approaches being explored. It's a bit overwhelming, but also incredibly exciting. But it's not just about having all these potential therapies, right? We also need ways to measure their effectiveness and ensure that the right treatment reaches the right patient.
You're absolutely right. And this brings us to the crucial area of biomarkers and endpoints, which play a vital role in clinical trials and drug development.
Okay, back up for a second.
Wow.
Biomarkers, endpoints. Can you explain what those are in simple terms?
Think of biomarkers as measurable signs that tell us something about a biological process or a disease state. For example, Specific proteins in the blood or certain patterns of brain activity measured by EEG could be considered biomarkers for SRD.
So it's like a clue that helps us understand what's going on inside the body.
Exactly. And endpoints are basically the outcomes that researchers are aiming to achieve in a clinical trial. They're the measures by which the effectiveness of a treatment is assessed. For example, if a new drug is designed to reduce seizure frequency in individuals with SRD, then the number of seizures a patient experiences after receiving the treatment would be a key endpoint.
So biomarkers are like the clues and endpoints are like the goals we're trying to achieve with treatment.
Precisely. And both are crucial for developing effective therapies. Researchers are actively working to identify reliable and meaningful biomarkers and endpoints for SRD, which will help them to design more robust clinical trials and to determine which treatments are truly making a difference for patients.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the basics of SYNGAP1 and SRD to the diverse pipeline of potential therapies and the importance of biomarkers and endpoints. It's clear that this is a rapidly evolving field with a lot of promising research underway. But I imagine there are still challenges and open questions that need to be addressed.
You're absolutely right. One of the key challenges revolves around the complexity of the SYNGAP1 gene itself. We've talked about how a shortage of the SYNGAP1 protein is the root cause of SRD, but it turns out that the gene can produce different versions or isoforms of the protein, and these isoforms can have slightly different functions.
Okay, so it's not just about having enough of the protein, but also about having the right version of the protein.
Exactly. And this complicates things when it comes to developing gene therapies. Researchers need to figure out which isoform is the most important for treatment and whether they need to replace all isoforms or just focus on a specific one.
That's a lot to figure out. It sounds like a really tricky puzzle.
It is. And there's another challenge that we've touched upon earlier, those missense variants. Remember those tiny changes in the SYNGAP1 gene that can have a wide range of effects on the protein's function?
Yes. We talked about how those variants can sometimes be more disruptive than just the simple shortage of the protein.
Exactly. And this creates a real challenge for both diagnosis and treatment. On the diagnostic front, these missense variants often lead to what are called variants of uncertain significance, or VUS, which basically means that scientists aren't sure whether a particular variant is causing disease or is just a harmless variation in the DNA. This uncertainty can be really frustrating for families seeking answers and can make it difficult to predict which treatments might be beneficial.
So it's like having a question mark hanging over their diagnosis.
Exactly. And on the treatment front, some therapies that aim to simply increase SYNGAP1 protein production might actually be harmful to patients with certain missense variants. If the variant is causing the protein to malfunction, increasing its production could make things worse.
So it's like adding fuel to a fire.
Precisely. That's why researchers are working hard to understand the effects of each missense variant and to develop ways to predict their impact on protein function. This is really crucial for developing personalized medicine approaches where treatments are tailored to the specific genetic makeup of each individual.
It sounds like there's still a lot we don't know about SYNGAP1 and SRD. But the good news is that researchers are making progress on multiple fronts.
That's right. There are several initiatives underway that are specifically focused on understanding and addressing the challenges posed by these missense variants. For instance, there's a program called EPI-MVP that's looking at all the known SYNGAP1 variants to assess their impact on protein structure and function.
So they're essentially trying to create a map of these variants to help guide diagnosis and treatment decisions.
Exactly. And there are other research groups around the world using sophisticated techniques like high-powered imaging and a computer modeling to study the effects of individual amino acid changes on protein activity. It's a really exciting area of research that has the potential to revolutionize our understanding of SRD and pave the way for more effective treatments.
It's amazing to think that these tiny changes in the SYNGAP1 gene can have such profound effects. And it's even more remarkable to see how researchers are tackling this challenge head on.
It really is. And it underscores the importance of continued research and investment in this field. There's still a lot we don't know, but the progress that's been made in such a short time is truly remarkable.
It gives me hope for the future of SRD research and for all those individuals and families affected by this challenging condition. So where do we go from here? What are the next steps in the fight against SRD?
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly informative. I feel like I've learned so much about this complex condition and the amazing work being done to unravel its mysteries and develop effective treatments.
Yeah, me too. What stands out to you as particularly hopeful or promising?
For me, it's the sheer amount of progress that's been made in such a short time. It wasn't that long ago that SRD was a relatively unknown disorder. Now we have a robust pipeline of potential therapies, a dedicated research community, sophisticated tools for studying the brain, and a passionate patient advocacy network that's actively driving progress. That's a really inspiring example of what can be achieved when science collaboration and determination come together.
Absolutely. And for our listeners who've been following along with this deep dive, what would you say is the most important takeaway? What should they be thinking about as they continue to learn about SRD?
I think the key takeaway is that there's real hope for the future. While SRD presents significant challenges for individuals and families, the research landscape is evolving rapidly, and there are multiple promising avenues being explored. The dedication of researchers, clinicians, and organizations like the SYNGAP Research Fund offers a glimmer of hope for a brighter future, a future where effective treatments are available and the full potential of individuals with SRD can be realized.
That's a beautiful thought. And I think it's important to remember that even though we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn and explore about SRD.
You're absolutely right. This is a complex field that's constantly evolving with new discoveries and advancements happening all the time.
So what can our listener do to stay informed and engaged with the latest developments in SRD research? Where can they go to learn more?
There are some fantastic resources available online. The SYNGAP Research Fund website is a great starting point with information about the disorder, the latest research findings, and ways to get involved. There are also several active online communities like Facebook groups and forums where families and individuals affected by SRD can connect with each other, share experiences, and find support. And of course, staying tuned to podcasts like this one can help you stay up to date on the most important developments in the field.
Excellent advice. And one final thought I'd like to leave our listeners with. Remember that knowledge is power. The more we understand about SRD, the better equipped we'll be to support those affected by this condition and to advocate for continued research and innovation.
I couldn't agree more. Every bit of knowledge we gain brings us closer to a future where SRD is no longer a mystery, but a condition that we can effectively treat and manage, empowering individuals to live their lives to the fullest.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of SYNGAP1 related disorder. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.